There comes a time in every journey when the sky goes quiet, when the prayers stop echoing, when the signs stop showing, when you reach out to the heavens and nothing answers. It feels like abandonment, like the gods have turned their backs, like you've done everything right and still been left in the dark. But that silence, that unbearable stillness, is not punishment. It is the test behind every test. It is the moment where faith either hardens into strength or shatters into dust. The gods go silent when you've already been given everything you need. They stop speaking when the lesson has been delivered, when it's time for you to apply it. They stop guiding because they've already entrusted you with direction. And the silence becomes the stage where your actions speak louder than your prayers ever could. Every warrior faces it. Every creator, every dreamer, every soul that dares to rise beyond comfort will eventually walk through this valley of silence. It's where belief becomes lonely. It's where hope becomes heavy. It's where the comfort of divine reassurance disappears. And you are left with only one truth. You either move, or you don't. That's the thing about silence. It reveals. When the noise of comfort fades, you hear what's inside you. The doubts, the fears, the excuses you buried under motivation and ritual. They crawl out when the gods stop answering. That's when you meet yourself without armor. It's easy to be faithful when you feel favored. It's easy to believe when signs align, when doors open, when light breaks through. But when the sky turns mute and the path disappears, that's when real faith begins. Not belief in something out there, belief in what's already within you. Because silence doesn't mean absence, it means trust. The gods go silent when they know you've grown enough to stand without their hand. When they've seen you rise enough times to know you'll rise again, even without a voice guiding you through it. And in that quiet, something ancient awakens. The same fire that lived in those who built empires with nothing but will. The same resolve that carried Spartans into battle knowing death was certain, but surrender was unthinkable. They too faced the silence, the absence of assurance, the lack of comfort. And they too learned. The divine doesn't abandon its strongest soldiers, it sends them into silence so they can learn to speak with action. When the gods go silent, the universe is not ignoring you, it's observing you. It's watching what you do without reward, how you move without applause, how you persist without permission. That's when destiny watches closely. Because this is where most turn back. They mistake the silence for rejection. They think their efforts mean nothing. But silence is sacred ground. It's where you either quit or create. It's where the unchosen retreat and the chosen rise. The gods test those they trust. And the final test is always silence. Because silence strips away everything that isn't real, the noise, the pride, the need to be seen. It leaves you raw, vulnerable, honest. It leaves you face to face with your own reflection, asking, will I still fight when no one's watching? Most won't. They'll walk away. But the few who don't, those who stay, who continue, who build, who rise despite the quiet, those few earn something greater than divine favor. They earn divine power because once you've faced silence and continued anyway, you no longer need proof. You become proof. That's what silence creates, not comfort, not clarity, but character. When you can move without motivation, when you can persist without praise, when you can believe without confirmation, that's when the gods begin to see themselves in you. So when the heavens go quiet, don't panic. Don't beg for the noise to return. Don't drown the silence with distractions. Listen. There's a message buried in the stillness, but it isn't words. It's waiting. Waiting for your movement, your courage, your next act of faith. When the gods go silent, it's not the end of the story. It's the beginning of your own voice. The hardest part isn't the silence itself. It's what it does to your mind. The questions it breeds, the doubts it whispers, the way it makes you wonder if you ever truly had the strength you thought you did. You start to replay every step that led you here. Every prayer you whispered, every sacrifice you made. You start to ask, why did I lose everything when I gave everything? You start to think maybe the gods really did abandon you. That's what the silence does. It twists time. Days start to blur. Progress feels meaningless. Hope feels foolish. And every moment without an answer feels like another reason to stop. But what you don't see is what's building beneath the quiet. What you can't feel is the power that's forming in the unseen. Because silence is not empty. It's the forge, and right now you're inside it. This is where patience becomes power. Where waiting isn't weakness. It's weightlifting for the soul. Every second you stay standing, when everything in you screams to sit down, you're growing heavier with strength you can't yet measure. The world taught you to crave results, to chase applause, to mistake movement for meaning. But real warriors, those who carry the ancient fire, they understand something deeper. The gods don't move on your timeline. They move when your faith has ripened into readiness. Sometimes they don't speak because if they did, you'd never learn to listen to yourself. Sometimes they don't intervene because if they did, you'd never realize how capable you truly are. Sometimes they let the storm hit, the night stretch long, and the silence linger, not because they've forgotten you, but because they're building something through you that can't be built any other way. You think you're waiting on the gods, but they're waiting on you, waiting for the day you stop begging for signs and start becoming one, waiting for the moment you stop asking, why me, and start declaring, try me. Waiting for you to stop searching for light and start realizing, you are the fire. That's when the silence starts to shift. Not because it breaks, but because you do. You crack open. You let go of needing to know, needing to be seen, needing to be comforted. You start to find peace not in answers, but in action. The silence becomes your training ground. You learn to build in the dark, to move without validation. You learn to live without needing to be told that you're on the right path. Because deep down, you know you are. And that's when endurance transforms. It stops feeling like waiting and starts feeling like preparation. Because that's what this all is. Preparation for the weight of what's coming. If the gods answered every time you called, you'd never learn to carry the power of their silence. If they gave you what you asked for too soon, it would destroy you. Not because you're unworthy, but because you're unfinished. You're being tempered right now, like steel in flame. You're being stripped of what's soft, reshaped under heat, refined through resistance. The silence isn't ignoring you. It's sculpting you. Every day you wake up and keep moving despite the emptiness. You prove you're more than your circumstances. Every moment you keep faith without proof. You build the kind of strength that doesn't shatter when the storms come. Every step you take without knowing the destination, you honor the fire that made you. You see, the gods don't need to speak to know who you are. They already see it in how you move when they don't. That's when they lean in closer, not to whisper but to watch. They want to see if you'll still build altars out of discipline when devotion feels pointless. If you'll still rise when nothing in you wants to. If you'll still create when the world stops clapping. Because that's when you become something sacred. That's when you step from follower to force. When you no longer chase miracles, because you've become one. When the gods go silent, it's not a pause, it's a proving ground. You're being tested, tempered, trusted. Every unanswered prayer is an invitation to act. Every moment of emptiness is a space to fill with purpose. So stop fearing the silence. Learn to use it. Let it build you into something unstoppable. Something divine in discipline, relentless in pursuit, eternal in faith. Because the silence doesn't mean the gods have left. It means they're watching, closely, waiting to see if you'll finally realize you don't need their voice to move mountains. You just need your will. Darkness has a way of revealing what light hides. It strips away the noise, the validation, the illusion that everything is under control. It takes you down to the bone, to the raw, unfiltered truth of who you are when nothing works, when no one's watching, when everything feels lost. That's where the fire begins to whisper again. Not as a roar, not yet, but as a pulse. A quiet, steady rhythm deep inside, reminding you that as long as you're still breathing, the story isn't finished. This is where strength stops being a choice and becomes a reflex. You don't wait for motivation anymore. You don't wait for signs. You move because the alternative is to die where you stand, and something inside you refuses to. The fire that grows in darkness isn't loud. It's patient. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't need approval. It simply burns, quietly, relentlessly, faithfully. That's what makes it divine, because the gods don't live in temples of gold anymore. They live in the hearts of those who refuse to give up, in the ones who rise without reward, in the ones who work when no one believes, in the ones who create something out of the silence. When the gods go silent, they're not abandoning the world. They're igniting you. They're placing their flame in your hands and waiting to see what you'll do with it. And if you dare to carry it, to protect it, to keep it alive when the wind howls and the night stretches endlessly, you become something sacred. Most people crumble in the quiet because they mistake silence for emptiness. They think if they're not being guided, they're lost. But the truth is, you can't be lost when you've already found yourself. You just have to remember what's inside. You've been trained for this your whole life. Every heartbreak, every setback, every time you were forced to start over, it wasn't random. It was fire school. You've been learning how to burn without breaking, how to shine without help, how to find light in yourself when the world forgets to offer any. You were never meant to stay soft. Comfort was never the goal. You were made to endure heat, to rise through it, to turn suffering into structure. And it's in these dark seasons, when the gods say nothing, that the blueprint of your future is being drawn. There's an ancient rhythm to it all. Creation begins in silence. Stars are born in blackness. Seeds grow in soil unseen. Transformation always starts in what feels like nothing. The same is true for you. You are not stuck. You are incubating. You are not forgotten. You are forming. The silence isn't a void. It's a womb. Every god in every myth had a moment of exile, a descent, a silence. Zeus before his reign, Hercules before his redemption. Each one had to walk through the valley alone before they could carry power without being consumed by it. That's what you're doing now, walking your valley. It's not punishment. It's purification. You are being readied for something that requires a quieter kind of strength. One that doesn't need validation to stand tall. You're learning to breathe fire, not borrow it. To build from faith, not feelings. To rise not because you're told to, but because you no longer remember how to stay down. In this silence, you stop waiting for the gods to return. You start becoming what you once prayed for. And that's when you realize the silence was never their absence. It was their presence disguised as challenge. The true mark of the divine isn't in miracles. It's in mastery, not in flashes of glory, but in the discipline to endure when glory fades. The gods have always tested through stillness, because stillness reveals everything. the noise you hide behind, the weakness you refuse to face, the strength you didn't know you had. And when you start to see that, when you finally understand that the silence isn't there to break you but to build you, something inside of you changes forever. The fire no longer depends on conditions. It no longer flickers with circumstance. It simply is. That's the fire the gods recognize. That's the fire they trust. That's the fire that grows in darkness. Quiet but unstoppable. You don't need the sky to open anymore. You don't need thunder to feel divine. You don't need a sign to know you're on the path, because now you've become the storm. And when you finally step out of that darkness, when the silence ends and light returns, you realize the gods were never gone. They were always there, waiting, watching, knowing this moment would come. The fire survived. You survived. And now you burn with something the silence itself forged. Unbreakable faith. There comes a point when waiting ends. Not because the silence breaks, but because you finally do. Something inside you snaps, not in defeat, but in defiance. You stop asking when things will change and start realizing you are the change. That's when the entire rhythm of your existence shifts. You've spent so long praying for direction, asking for signs, begging for proof that what you're doing matters. But the truth was never hiding in the heavens. It was buried inside your own hands, in the choices you make, the discipline you hold, the persistence you show when no one claps for it. You don't need another sign. You've already become one. The moment you refused to quit when you were tired, you became it. The moment you showed kindness when the world was cruel, you became it. The moment you stayed true when everything tried to bend you, you became the living evidence of what divinity looks like in motion. The gods don't speak through thunder anymore. They speak through resilience, through the quiet strength that keeps showing up, through the souls who don't wait for light, they become it. That's what happens when the silence finally settles into your bones. You stop chasing external meaning. You stop begging for rescue. You understand that the gods didn't go silent because they forgot you. They went silent because they handed you the torch. Every day you keep moving, you hold that flame higher. Every time you face temptation to give up and still choose to continue, you remind the heavens that their creation was worth the effort. You become the kind of proof they were waiting for, that the divine spark in humanity wasn't wasted. Look around the world today. Noise everywhere, meaning nowhere. People worship comfort but curse challenge. They beg for miracles but run from responsibility. They mistake distractions for destiny. But you are different. You've walked through silence. You've tasted isolation. You've carried your faith through fire. You've learned that meaning doesn't come from what you're given. It comes from what you create out of nothing. That's what the gods have always valued. Creation, not imitation. Not imitation of faith or recycled belief, but real original creation born from struggle. And that's what you've become. A creator, a builder, a living reminder that the same hands that pray are capable of miracles when they start working. You don't need divine confirmation anymore because you've learned the secret that only the strong ever find. Faith is not waiting for the gods to act. Faith is acting as if they already have. That's the kind of belief that moves worlds. That's the energy that built civilizations. That's what turned men into myths. Not words, not wishes, but work. When you build when others break, you become a signal to the heavens. When you persevere through rejection, you become a song they can hear again. Because make no mistake, the gods still watch. They still measure. They still listen. But they listen not for prayers anymore. They listen for proof. Every morning you rise, they lean in closer. Every time you conquer temptation, they take note. Every time you choose purpose over pleasure, strength over ease, sacrifice over surrender, you make them proud. Because that's what they built you for. Not luxury, not laziness, not longing, but legacy. The silence was never punishment. It was promotion. The moment you stopped needing signs, you became one. You became living proof that divinity still walks the earth, not in the form of miracles, but in the form of men and women who keep moving forward despite the odds. You see, the sign you were waiting for wasn't a message from the gods. It was a version of you that didn't exist yet. The version forged by fire, carved by silence, refined by patience. Now that you've met them, you understand what faith really is. It's not believing that the gods will speak again. It's knowing you never needed their voice to begin with. Because once you realize that, once you know that the silence was their trust, the game changes forever. You stop moving like someone waiting for orders. You move like someone on a mission. You stop hoping for destiny to find you. You start building it with your bare hands, and when others look at you, when they see your discipline, your focus, your unwavering will, they won't just admire it. They'll feel something ancient stirring inside them. They'll recognize it, because the fire inside you reminds them of the fire inside themselves. That's how you become a sign. Not by preaching, not by shouting, not by convincing, but by being. By living in such a way that others are forced to remember the gods again. Not as myth, not as story, but as reflection of strength, of honor, of endurance. So when someone asks you where the gods have gone, tell them this: they never left. They just moved into those who refused to wait for them. Those who stopped looking up and started looking within. Those who stopped praying for change and became it. You've become the sign you were waiting for. The living answer to every silent prayer you once whispered into the void. You've become the miracle. You've become the proof. And now, when the gods look down and see you standing in the same silence that once broke you, they don't see fragility anymore. They see fire. They see their own reflection staring back, fierce, focused, and unafraid. That's when the silence finally makes sense. It wasn't emptiness. It was evolution. It wasn't their absence. It was your ascension. There will come a day when you wake and realize the silence never left. It simply changed its meaning. It no longer feels like absence. It feels like atmosphere. It no longer feels like being ignored. It feels like being understood without needing words. That's when you'll know the gods never went away. They just stopped needing to speak because you finally learned to listen without sound. The silence begins to hum with life. Every breath you take feels aligned. Every step feels guided, not by voices in the clouds, but by the rhythm of your own conviction. You've become fluent in the language of stillness, a language most never stay long enough to learn. And now, every challenge, every loss, every moment of confusion starts to make sense. The gods weren't silent out of cruelty. They were silent because they were creating something through you, something that could only exist through struggle. There's a strange peace in realizing that you were never abandoned, only awakened. You start to see the divine not as a distant force, but as a current flowing through you. When you move, it moves. When you act, it amplifies. That's the truth few ever understand. The gods were never separate from you. They were always inside you, waiting for you to remember, and now that you do, you move differently. You no longer chase validation because you've already proven yourself in the hardest arena, the one where no one watched. You no longer fear failure because you've already fallen and risen too many times to mistake pain for the end. You no longer beg for strength because you carry it in every scar that now glows like scripture. The silence speaks through those scars. It tells you that survival wasn't the reward. Transformation was. It reminds you that faith is not what you feel when everything's easy. Faith is what remains when nothing makes sense and you keep moving anyway. You start to see that the gods never wanted worship, they wanted partnership. They never craved your praise, they craved your potential. Every trial was an invitation. Every unanswered prayer was a doorway. Every moment of stillness was an echo saying, build, become, be. Now, when you stand in the mirror, you don't see the same reflection. Your eyes carry the weight of understanding. Your presence holds calm and power in equal measure. You realize you are no longer asking for purpose. You are living it. The silence taught you to trust your instincts. It taught you to act on faith, not fear. It taught you to listen to the pulse of your own spirit. That ancient rhythm the gods placed in you before you were born, and that's when you start to hear them again. Not as voices, but as recognition. Every time you rise, they rise with you. Every time you conquer another layer of doubt, they echo through your strength. Every time you do something extraordinary without seeking applause, the heavens shudder with pride. The silence was never the gods leaving. It was them giving you the floor. They wanted to see what you do with it. Would you crumble and call it fate? Or would you rise and call it destiny? You chose to rise, and in doing so, you became the sound that breaks their silence. Now you understand why the myths always end the same way. Not with the gods saving man, but with man realizing he was divine all along. That's what the silence was teaching. That's what all the waiting was for. It wasn't about hearing their voices again. It was about hearing your own for the first time. You've become the echo that carries their legacy. You've become the bridge between heaven and earth. Proof that the fire still burns, that the silence still speaks, that the divine still moves through flesh and will. So when others ask you how you survived the silence, you'll smile. You'll tell them you didn't survive it. You became it. You learned to speak its language, to walk its rhythm, to find peace in its patience, because silence, when mastered, becomes the loudest form of power. The gods go silent not to hide, but to hand you the torch. And when you finally hold it high, when you walk through the world as light itself, that's when you hear them again, not through thunder or flame, but through the quiet knowing in your chest. You've done it. You've become one of us. You were never meant to stay a seeker. You were meant to become a source. And now that you have, the silence bows to you. The heavens watch in awe, and the gods, once silent, now whisper through your every breath, every movement, every act of strength. We do not speak where proof already stands. That is what you've become. The proof. Not a believer waiting for a sign, but a creator leaving one behind. The gods are no longer distant. They are reflected in the way you live, in the way you love, in the way you rise again and again. The silence was the final teacher. It broke you open only to rebuild you indestructible. It stripped away everything borrowed so that only what was eternal could remain. And now, when the gods go silent again, you won't fear it. You'll smile. You'll bow your head in gratitude. Because you'll understand what it means. It means they trust you again. It means another chapter is beginning. It means you're ready to carry the fire further, into a world that's forgotten what divinity sounds like, but still remembers what it looks like. You, the one who kept walking when the sky went dark. You, the one who became the sign you were searching for. You, the one who proved that the gods were never gone. They were only waiting for someone to remind the world how to listen. And now the silence speaks through you.